Before I start talking about the way I've used Microsoft Teams in my teaching, it might be worth firstly explaining the context. So I've been using Teams on a Master's module. The Master's is a Master's in Teaching English to Speakers of Other Languages, MA TESOL, combined with a Master's in Applied Linguistics. So I've had these two groups of students, and 47 students opted to take the particular module which I've used Teams in, and this module is called Digital Technologies for Language Teaching. So 47 students, and those 47 students were divided roughly into groups of 15, 16, so 3 groups of 15, 16, and each of those groups were timetabled 2 hours per week, physical classroom taught sessions, and those classrooms for this particular module were arranged in the university's computer rooms. Now the module was assessed in 3 different ways, and 2 of those ways drew heavily on the use of Microsoft Teams. So the 3 assessments were, first of all, an assessed discussion group, which was arranged with groups of 4 or 3 students that used Teams, and that constituted 20% of the total assessed mark. The second assessment was a group work production of a wiki with an embedded video essay. That was group work. That also heavily used Teams, and that comprised 40% of the assessment. And the final 40% was an individual, a more traditional assignment, which I won't need to talk about here. So 3 assessments, 2 of which drew on Teams heavily, and since Teams was heavily used for the communication occurring within those 2 assessment modes, the discussion groups and the production of a wiki, we can see immediately there that there's an element of authentic assessment with a real life application once, of course, the students finish the MA programs. I've used Teams in 3 different ways. First of all, in the physical sessions, in the physical classrooms, students bring along their mobile devices, phones or tablets, and I ask them to access Teams. I usually set up pair work so that different pairs are organised within the 15 or 16 students, and I may have pairs distributed across the computer room. This is exemplified in the case study, which has been videoed, and so I'm demonstrating the use of Teams on mobile devices for integrating mobile technology into a physical classroom, and I'll say more about that in detail in a moment. The second way that I've used Teams is in terms of the formal assessment, and I've already discussed that I've done that in 2 ways. First of all, through discussion groups, and secondly through the wiki and video essay, where students have to collaborate in both those assessments outside of class time to collaborate and discuss and formulate their discussion and their video essay or their product. And the third way I have used Teams is for general authentic communication with me, where they have questions and they can either approach me individually or through the general channel on the Digital Tech Teams module. So now I want to talk about the use of Teams within the physical classroom on mobile devices. Now, the case study itself had the particular aim of showing how English language can be practiced within a mobile texting based medium. So the scenario for this was a business simulation where certain students are buyers and certain students are sellers, and they have to come up with the best deal. But they don't do this through the mode of face-to-face speaking. They do it through the medium of texting. And so you can see again here there's an element of authenticity built into it. There is a targeted outcome, and basically we try to find out who can get the best deal. And in so doing, the students are required to use various kinds of English language in use, language for negotiation. And I think we can see here that this idea of simulated texting has a generative potential for a whole range of disciplines. I think we can imagine ourselves in many different scenarios. It might be conference calls or conference texting, or indeed business simulations in the real world where students have to do that. Maybe it can be simulating content where certain students are asking for clarification on points of literature or points of chemistry or whatever, where the students can actually get together and be texting with each other. This process of negotiation, this process of articulation in text has a number of advantages. In fact, it actually allows more thinking time. The pace of typing is slower than the pace of speaking out loud, so it enables students to formulate their thoughts in a slightly more relaxed way. And there has been research to suggest that those students who are slightly more reticent when it comes to speaking out loud in class actually come alive when they're put into texting mode. So I think there are genuine applications there for this. The other point about it, of course, is that because it's happening in the physical classroom, it enables a variance of dynamics. So of course we're not spending the whole of the class time actually on the phones, but after a certain period of time the phone activity stops and the students join back and get back into face-to-face mode so that they can compare notes and indeed come up or discover who has had the best deal. And in this way the actual texting mode has sort of acted as a kind of rehearsal for spoken mode, and again this is a confidence builder. It's important to say that the students before they come into the class to engage in this texting simulation, they don't go into it cold, and in fact they have been given a preparation activity to do in advance. And that preparation activity is what I call a video puzzle, which is embedded into Canvas. So they've used Canvas in advance of this particular session. To prepare for the session, they access the video puzzle, they answer questions about the video that's on the puzzle. This video itself provides the context for the simulation that they will subsequently engage in the physical classroom. So here I can say to a certain extent there's an integration of Canvas accessing alternative media and the use of Teams on mobile phones in the physical classroom. The two formally assessed tasks, as I've said, both involve teams and both are organised according to private channels, and the same students work together for both assessments. So the group of 3 students for the discussion groups is the same group of 3 or 4 students for the assessed wiki. And the way, first of all, the discussion groups work is that they are set a discussion task. In this case it was asking the students to discuss their understanding and application of the notions of flipped teaching and blended learning. They had to come up with examples of those, submit them onto the discussion groups, talk about them, and I had a set of criteria that I would use to assess the effectiveness of the discussion, and students were inducted into that, and that was graded. And that particular discussion task, they had about 2 weeks, a period of about 2 weeks to engage in that assess discussion task. The other assessment, as I've said, is a group wiki. Again, the same groups, and for this the students have to produce a wiki which includes an embedded video. The students have to find an example of using technology, a video of teachers using technology, and then the students have to conduct like a talking head, a vox pop type commentary on the video. They superimpose their commentaries onto this video, and that then becomes a video essay. That video essay is embedded into the platform. Actually, for the platform in this case, I've asked them to use Microsoft PowerPoint for that, and they generate a wiki using Microsoft PowerPoint and the embedded video essay. And all the negotiation for that, all the work, all the collaboration happens through Teams, and the final product is uploaded onto the files area of their own respective private channel, and I will access those files in order to assess them. Another use of Teams I found has become apparent during the period of online teaching. I've used Teams to deliver my online teaching. I've used Teams meetings so that I've had the PowerPoint within the Teams meeting as presentation mode, but more importantly, I've been able to use private chats as a way of orchestrating breakout groups. So I've nominated specific students to go into specific chat rooms. So for example, if I've had say 30 students attending an online session, I've allocated groups of 4 students to identify each other and to contact each other, include me in the chat, and then at certain points during the lecture presentation I ask them to go into their chat breakout groups and text a discussion about the point that I have just raised in the presentation. I'm able to flick between each of the texting chat groups, pick up any points, and then after giving them say 5 minutes of this working together in their groups, I recall them to the main meeting, and we are able to continue, and I'm able to pick up on any points that have occurred during the chat breakout groups. I've also been able to use Teams to demonstrate the idea of collaborative writing, whereby again in groups students or one lead student uploads a document, a Word document, an online Word document, and we've been able to in real time collaborate and build upon that document so that we can see the way a document builds itself through the process of collaboration with various students adding things in, and we are then able to reflect on this process and its value for language teaching and learning. I can't say that I've had many major problems in implementing the use of Teams in my work. I think the crucial thing here is rehearsal. so that you are well practiced in how to do that. I've asked student volunteers, for example, to engage with me so that I can test things out in advance. And crucially, particularly in terms of determining group work, I think students need to be primed well in advance as to which groups they're going to be going into. Ensure that the students themselves have lots of preparation activities that they can do in advance, so that when you actually come to be using Teams in real time, particularly in the online scenario, that the students already know what they have to do. I guess the big issue for me really is how to refine or improve the process of breakout groups, so that it becomes easier for the tutor to flit from one group to the next and, for example, not have to leave the actual meeting in order to do so. This has been a little bit clunky, and I hope there may be a fix for that in future. But fundamentally, particularly in the online era that we're currently in, I feel that the use of Teams has really enabled me to continue my teaching in a way which is not massively disrupted. So how does my use of Teams, I think, promote the idea of active learning? Well, I think we can look at it in two ways. First of all, the students are actively learning the use of software, or at least a methodology which then they can take experientially and apply to their own teaching situations in the future. This is what is known in English language teaching as loop input. You experience the new knowledge through the same methodology. So here the methodology is actually the use of the software within a teaching scenario, but that itself then becomes new knowledge which you can apply as a methodology yourselves as a teacher of English in the future. So that's one aspect of active learning. And the other aspect of active learning is the fact that particularly through the assessments, you are being required to access new content information. For example, it might be about flipped learning, it might be various abstract concepts, it might be language acquisition theories or whatever. But you are accessing that information as content, you are bringing it back into a discussion forum, and you are discussing your understanding of that content with your peers through collaboration, through social construction, and thereby you are refining and enhancing through scaffolding your new knowledge. This is an active learning process, and so these two elements, the experience of the methodology and the experience of the content, are fundamental elements to the notion of active learning, I think. Now, in relation to digital fluency, again, I think we can maybe talk about two aspects, not entirely unrelated to the idea of active learning, in fact. The first thing is that students are learning the software. They're becoming fluent in the use of software, and this software is likely to be something, because it's Microsoft, that is likely to be used in the future. So they are developing fluency in that way. That is, they're not likely to be as intimidated by using such software when they enter into the world of work. And of course, many of my students may not necessarily end up being teachers, but this skill will nonetheless equip them in other professions as well. And the second area, more related to the case study and specifically to the area of English language learning, is a consideration of the conventions of texting literacy. What in fact makes an appropriate text depending on the context that you are communicating in. So when we look at the texts that the students have done as part of the business simulation, we can look at the quality of the texting language that they have used. Of course, we have records of that because it's there for us all to see. We can look at instances of that language. We can analyze it, look at it in terms of its accuracy and its appropriacy, and we can then generalize as to what makes effective texting. And this is, in fact, in the field known as texting literacy. And again, in relation to authentic assessment, it's very closely related to the other two attributes, but the students are being assessed about things that they will engage in the real world of work. They will have online discussions and they will have collaborations. Online discussions is assessment, the first assessment, and collaborations to produce a product, in this case a wiki, is the second assessment. These are highly likely to be required in the world of work after the programme, and so they are eminently authentic. I can't say there's been any degree of seamless integration between the use of Canvas and Teams, but they have worked in parallel and worked well together. This module has had all its content on Canvas. I haven't used Vital in this module at all. And to this extent, Canvas has been the platform for access of all material, whereas Teams has been the platform for all dynamic communication. What this has meant, for example, is that I haven't had to use any VLE based communication tool to target all the students in the group because I've been able to use Teams for that. It's a pity that there is not more seamless integration between the two platforms. This may come in the future, I'm not sure. What I have had within Teams in the top set of horizontal tabs is a web page tab, and I've been able to implant into that a link which takes students immediately into the Canvas module. Though, to be honest, I haven't really asked whether students have used that facility at all. My sense is that they've really been treating both platforms as separate. They either go to one or the other. So there does need to be a way of looking at the way the two platforms can be more seamlessly integrated. What advice would I give to anyone who wants to try to do an activity in their own discipline which is similar to the one I have demonstrated in the case study? Well, the first thing is to have clear aims and anticipated learning outcomes and ensure that the activity itself works towards them. The second is ensure that the context for the activity is fully prepared. This may entail an element of flipped teaching, such that the students in their groups or in other groups actually go away and do preparation on the context or the content before they actually come to the physical class to do the task which is going to be set for them. The third area is to ensure that you have prepared well the way the pairs or the groups are going to function within the taught session. That means having listed out the names of your students as pairs or groups in advance, so that can be handed out to the students and they can know immediately who is in whose group, and so there is no kind of messing around with sorting that out during the session. The next important consideration is to make sure that the task is compatible with the technology and that there is a tangible outcome. So you need to devise, in this case, tasks which fit with the medium of using Teams on smartphones. If you don't have something which the students can envisage as being kind of realistic, then the task will fall down and the students may well just end up thinking it's kind of tokenistic or superficial. And the final thing is to include plenty of time for reflection on the task success itself, and this is still within the taught session. So reflection on the success of the task, on the process of the task, on the learning outcomes of the task, so that the students can articulate what they have learned, and so learning outcomes can be made explicit, and also to have time available so that we can consider applications of the particular task in other authentic situations, for example in the world of work, or in my case in the world of teaching.